Welcome back to the Flying with the Flock podcast, the easiest place and the best place to get all of your Eagles and NFL related news. I'm your host, Matt, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the next episode of this Eagles off season. I guess technically it's the official off season now that we're 1 or 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week, 1 week removed from the Super Bowl. Past 2 weeks, maybe even, yeah, past 2 weeks have felt like a month to me at the very least. So, a little bit out of whack, but here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We finally made it, and we have quite a few things in store for today's episode to touch on. But before getting into that, if I could ask you guys to leave a like and subscribe, that would be very much appreciated. But with all that out of the way, with all the pleasantries out of the way, this morning it was announced that the NFL is going back to Brazil, this time with the Los Angeles Chargers leading the way as the designated home team. I just wanted to break down the possible teams that they could be facing. Uh, as I will say, the Brazil game was definitely fun. I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the lead up to it because everybody overblew a bunch of different factors, whether it was possible gang violence or the Eagles and Packers wearing green or the wildfires down there. Everybody um, everybody definitely not overhyped, but they definitely made it bigger than it actually was. It was a fun game to sit down and watch. Obviously, it's the Eagles' first game last season. I wouldn't expect it to be the first game next season. If they're gonna do that, they would probably do it with a different, with a first game of another team's season. I would expect the Madrid game to probably be that. The Dolphins are hosting that, I believe. I'm trying to remember that off the top of my head, but I believe the Dolphins will be the designated home game for the Brazil game. I mean, for the Madrid game. So, um, yeah, looking at some of these possible opponents and who I would believe would give one of the more fun matchups for this Chargers team. Uh, Obviously, I don't think they're going to have a divisional matchup down in Brazil, although that would be interesting if they brought Chiefs Chargers. Sometimes that's like the premier matchup of the season right there. The Chargers always go hard against the Chiefs. So I would definitely think that the NFL would ponder that, but I don't 100% believe that they would commit to having a divisional game. The Chargers lose a home divisional game down in Sao Paulo. Broncos, again, probably wouldn't be as big. They probably want a big matchup, like fireworks style matchup, for the Chargers to help bring more influence down into South America as a whole. Same thing with the Raiders. Uh, Raiders are going to be sucking for the next couple of years. I don't think we want to demonstrate our bad teams on the global stage. Then again, we have like last year we had like the Colts and the Patriots play in like Germany. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they pull something like that, like a bad team versus the Chargers. But it would definitely be interesting if they did a divisional matchup down there in Sao Paulo. Another matchup that I would actually think would be kind of cool would be the Houston Texans. Houston Texans, Chargers, two bigger teams, especially in the AFC. It would be a rematch from Wild Card Weekend, and the Chargers would probably try to get their revenge on the Texans for knocking them out of the playoffs. I actually do feel like this is the most likely matchup that we'll see down in Sao Paulo. It'll probably be early on in the season. Houston Texans obviously wouldn't have to travel as far as the Chargers to get there, so it makes it optimal for travel wise what teams would take longer to get to Sao Paulo. And with the Eagles doing it last year, it does take a lot of travel no matter where you are. I mean, it takes around 12 hours, I believe, to get down there, and it's like a tight schedule and stuff like that till kickoff itself. So overall, I do feel like this is the most likely matchup. Houston Texans, Chargers, revenge game down in Sao Paulo. But let's touch on some of the other matchup that could happen. We have Colts as well. Colts, I don't think would happen, though it would be expected of the NFL to probably throw a bad team down there to try and play. They've done it, especially in the Germany games. They've done it in the London games, though not as frequently. But they've definitely screwed over like the Munich games a lot with teams like the Colts that are not ever in contention for a playoff spot. Uh, let's see. The Commanders, again, another interesting matchup. I don't think I would mind watching that down in Sao Paulo. Um, yeah, that would be an interesting matchup for me. Seeing Jaden Daniels go down play on one of the NFL's biggest stages. Honestly, it would definitely be an interesting matchup for both teams. Have their franchise guy. Both of them have an aging defense, which they'll probably have to reload, especially during this offseason, especially with the Commanders losing as many free agents on the defensive side of the ball as they currently are. It would definitely be an interesting matchup. I don't think it would be the best matchup. It would probably be better for a Sunday night at SoFi. But that's just me saying that. We could obviously see the NFL take the Commanders down there with a young team and try to build a fan base or bring influence of this Commanders team down into South America. I'm going to skip over this team because this is my worst nightmare for a Sao Paulo game. I'll come back to this. We also have the Steelers. Again, if we're coming down to Sao Paulo, we're definitely going to want to bring some of our best teams and some of our more explosive teams, and the Steelers just aren't that. They're missing like the lackluster feeling that they used to have. Like if you brought a younger Big Ben, Antonio Brown, and a Le'Veon Bell down there, I definitely feel like that would be fireworks. But now we don't even know who the Steelers quarterback is. I feel like it might be Justin Fields, but we'll touch on that in a little bit. So yeah, overall, this would be a boring game for me. I mean, I believe the Chargers would most likely win this game anyway, but it would be a battle of physicality to say the least. Finally, before we get into my nightmare matchup for Sao Paulo, we also have the Vikings as an honorable mention. I do feel like this Vikings team, if they have their guy at quarterback, could be an interesting matchup against the Chargers. It's a good defense versus a solid defense. Obviously, the Vikings being the good defense, though they have to re-sign some of their free agents. It would definitely be a fun matchup. I could definitely see this being like probably the second most likely matchup of the Sao Paulo game, right behind the Texans Chargers. But overall, I just don't feel like the NFL, if they don't get Sam Darnold back, I don't think that they would send the Vikings down ahead of time, only because we don't know what they would look like, especially with a quarterback like McCarthy under center. And finally, my nightmare matchup for this for this Charger, I kind of gave it away. For this Chargers Sao Paulo game would be the Eagles going back down to Brazil again for the second time in 2 years. My bad. I don't know why I couldn't figure out how many years it's been. But yeah. Although the Eagles have a large fan base down there now because of the last Sao Paulo game, it would make sense to take the Eagles down there. I just personally wouldn't want us to go down there 2 years back to back. Though this year we wouldn't lose a home game, it would take away an away game, which I'd be fine with. Remember, last season I wasn't that big on losing a home game as the Eagles. And if I'm a Chargers fan, I don't feel very highly on losing a home game if we have to go down to Sao Paulo. I feel like the NFL should work out a deal where there is not each team, but if a team has to go international. They don't lose a home game. Rather, they add an international game. Uh, they add like an international game slot. I'm not entirely sure how it would work, but I definitely feel like the NFL would throw the reigning Super Bowl champs back down in Sao Paulo. Though this is my probably fourth most likely out of all the options, with Houston Texans being the first, Vikings being the second, Commanders being the third, and Eagles being the fourth. I definitely feel like the Eagles are up there in possibility, but I just don't feel like they're the leading front runner for going down and facing the Chargers. I just feel like that revenge game would probably work best on that on the NFL's biggest stage in South America. So yeah, Sao Paulo, we're going back. That was just announced this morning as of recording this. I'm pretty sure I'm recording this on Wednesday, so I might release it tonight. Might release it Saturday. I'm not entirely sure though. All right, so I'm looking at the Eagles' opponents for who would be the most likely for the Eagles' home opener. So we have teams like obviously divisional games: Dallas, New York, and Washington. Those games would be interesting. To me, the Dallas Cowboys are second in who would be the most likely to be at the kickoff game, dropping a banner on Dallas's heads after they haven't been able to do it in the past 30 years. Would be fun for me as an Eagles fan and being a lifelong Dallas hater. It would definitely be fun sending them to the link and ultimately dropping that banner on top of their heads. But let's get into who I think is most likely. That being the Detroit Lions facing off against the Eagles in the NFL kickoff for the 2025 season. Obviously, the last Super Bowl winner always plays on a Thursday night NFL kickoff to the season. I do feel like the Lions would be the most likely. Lions did it 2 years ago against the Chiefs, and they did beat the Chiefs on their banner hanging night. So I definitely feel like Detroit would be up there. Obviously, a lot of people wanted that to be the NFC Championship game last year, and we weren't able to get that. So I know Detroit players are talking a bunch of smack, like they probably would have beat us. Just to let you guys know, looking at a fully healthy Commanders team being beat, us dropping 55 points on their defense, and then going in and facing the Chiefs in the Super Bowl and dropping 40 on their head. Detroit, you guys weren't winning. There was no way in hell that you guys were coming out of that. So I would suggest that you stop talking before you give us bulletin board material for when we face you guys next at home, because that's going to be loud when you all come to the link. But anyway, I do feel like Detroit would be the most likely out of all the possible suitors. Obviously, Dallas being second, but Detroit makes the most sense. They're another high-powered offense. They're another superstar team in the league. So overall, I do feel like this Lions team makes the most sense going against the Eagles on kickoff. Obviously, we have the Cowboys would make sense. I would personally enjoy it. That would probably be my second most wanted matchup out of these. Then we also have probably the third most likely being the Los Angeles Rams, being a matchup of that NFC divisional game. It would make a lot of sense if the NFL, since they like to do playoff rematches on prime time, it would make a lot of sense for this Rams team to come to Philly again and try to beat the Eagles on their banner lowering night. So, yeah, my most likely to play the Eagles at home during the kickoff of the NFL would be the Detroit Lions. I'm seeing that everywhere now too, so it just makes a lot of sense in my head as of recording this. Obviously, it seems like our home schedule is a lot easier than our away schedule. Home, we have Cowboys, Giants, Commanders, obviously. Commanders being the hardest matchup out of those three. Lions, hard matchup. Bears, depends on how their offseason looks. Rams would be a hard matchup. Broncos, sneaky hard matchup, though I feel like the Eagles might have their way with that Broncos defense. And Raiders would be an easy matchup. Again, Dallas, Giants, Commanders. Only hard one out of those would be Commanders. Packers on the road would be hard. Vikings on the road would be hard. Bucks on the road, we're probably going to lose that one. Kansas City on the road, I could probably see us pulling that out. Obviously, I mentioned it earlier. Los Angeles Chargers on the road, I could see us winning that one. Bills, we might lose. It depends, because we're in Buffalo, so it kind of depends. But Eagles definitely have a stacked season when it comes to opponents this year, who they're going to face. Very early predictions. I could see us sweeping Dallas and the Giants, making us 4-0, splitting with the Commanders, making us 5-1, winning against Detroit, making us 6-1, winning against the Bears, making us 7-1, probably winning against the Rams, making us 8-1. We might lose to the Broncos, even though I just said that we might be. I'm just gonna assume that we're gonna lose to the Broncos, putting us at 8-2. Beat the Raiders, 9-2. Packers probably win, sitting at 10-2. Vikings win, 11-2. Bucks we lose, 10-3. Kansas City, I feel like we probably beat, so sitting at 11-3. Chargers we beat, 12-3. I'm missing a game somewhere in there. So I think we're at like 13-3 now, and then lose to the Bills. So I could easily see us going 13-4 this season before we look at any offseason moves. Something I do want to touch on would be the rumor that Kellen Moore is interviewing Eagles position coaches to fill in his defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator position. Mainly, obviously, Nussmeier. I feel like Nussmeier's gone. Greg Nussmeier, our quarterback's coach, is most likely going down to New Orleans to become the offensive coordinator under Kellen Moore. But he also rumored that our running backs coach Jamal Singleton is also interviewing with the Saints for the offensive coordinator job. Don't love that. I would rather keep Jamal Singleton. He seems like a good coach, especially when it came to trying to get the most out of Saquon, and also coaching up Kenny Gainwell and Will Shipley right behind Saquon. I know part of that's them watching Saquon and sitting down with Saquon in the film room, but Jamal Singleton seems to get the most out of his guys during the season. Obviously, Kellen Moore is also interviewing defensive backs coach Christian Parker for the defensive coordinator job. Now, that one worries me just a little bit more than Jamal Singleton. It would definitely be a step up for Christian Parker, and he was kind of the reason why Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean have developed to who they are now, Super Bowl champions, and both of them are premier corners in this NFL, in the league. So, he's worked under Vic Fangio for the past few years anyway, so he might be looking for a little bit of pay raise. But it is also rumored that Brandon Staley, who was the Chargers head coach? Brandon Staley, that's it. Brandon Staley is also possibly interviewing for the defensive coordinator position at the Saints. So I feel like Greg Nussmeier goes down, obviously. I feel like he becomes offensive coordinator. And Brandon Staley probably also gets the defensive coordinator job only because he's had more experiences with the play calling position of defensive coordinator, which is actually a common theme that you're seeing a lot of young head coaches bringing in ex-head coaches that are defensive minded to be their defensive coordinator, to be their rock while they focus on the offense. It's just a point I wanted to throw out there. You're seeing it with the Colts, the Bears, and possibly the Saints here. So not a horrible idea from Kellen Moore, but they got their work cut out for them down in the Bayou. All right. So I just want to go back over some of the free agents that the Eagles have to pick up. Zach Bond, obviously, is most likely going to get re-signed with the Eagles. That's how it's seeming to go. Obviously, a lot of different places are trying to poach him from the Eagles because he just proved himself to be an all-pro linebacker. But I do feel like he ultimately re-signs with the Eagles on a fair deal. Mekhi Becton, also a lot of other teams are looking to pick him off as a offensive guard there for their team. I do feel like the Eagles either re-sign him or use a franchise tag on him. Use a franchise tag on him to bring him back on a not exactly cheap deal, but still bring him back in order to keep him around for another year, then try to figure out a deal with him. I do feel like Milton Williams is probably gone. It's just how the things are kind of shaken out, especially through the rumor mill. It seems like Milton Williams and Josh Sweat most likely leave, which is a little bit upsetting. I was hoping to keep one or the other, not both, obviously, but I guess that's just how the cookie crumbles at this point. It would be nice to bring back both of these top free agent signings, but unfortunately, we're just not going to have enough money to sign everybody that we can. Rather, we're just going to have to do what we do best and reload through the draft and focus on the guys that we currently have. All right, so next up, we're going to go over a little segment where I'm going to be doing this throughout the off season, and this is what I'm going to go division by division, covering what every team needs to do this off season. Now, this will probably bleed into the free agents period as well. So we'll have more. Maybe I'll come back and cover a couple of teams that I feel like deserve it. But at the end of the day, the ideas are still standing no matter what happens through this offseason. All right, first off, we're covering the AFC North today. The Steelers are going to be our first topic of discussion. The Steelers, in my opinion, need to move on from Mike Tomlin if they want to evolve with the times around them. Rather, they're kind of just keeping themselves at the middle of the pack, like keeping the standard, yes, keeping a winning season, yes, keeping in playoff contention. But for the past few years, for as long as I can remember now, they have been first-round exits under different offensive coordinators, under different quarterbacks, under basically almost different teams except for a couple of different players. But I do feel like I do feel like Mike Tomlin needs to go if they want to start rebuilding. Obviously, he's not going to be leaving this season. This might be looking out at the future, but ultimately, if you bring in a guy that's definitely going to keep your culture consistent and is able to control different personalities in the locker room, then he's still a solid quarterback. I mean, still a solid coach, but at the end of the day, he's not going to take you as far as he possibly could, especially earlier in his career. Steelers need to re-sign Justin Fields to a multi-year deal and try to keep it as cheap as possible to build the team around him. Obviously, you have your choices between 3 quarterbacks right now. 4 if you're counting Sam Darnold, but I'm not really counting him. You have it between Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. Me personally, I love Aaron Rodgers, but you don't want to bring back a guy that's nearly going to be, 43 years old at the quarterback position. Although he might be a nice bridge quarterback and you draft a guy, sit behind him for a year. And Mike Tomlin knows how to handle personalities as well in that locker room. It could work, but I just don't think that's the best possible scenario. Russell Wilson, he's looking like he's going elsewhere, if not the Raiders. He could go to another quarterback needy team. Could go to the Colts. Wouldn't be a horrible spot for him to go. Maybe as a little bit of a backup, but also trying to help sharpen Anthony Richardson's passing ability as a quarterback. Justin Fields, I feel like, would be the best option at this moment where the Steelers are sitting, especially draft-wise, which they won't be able to draft one of the top two premier quarterbacks at the position. They might be able to draft a guy later in like maybe the third and fourth round, get a Kyle McCord, get a Will Howard. Wouldn't be a horrible pick either. Both of these guys are proven to be solid quarterbacks now they're pocket passers, but they've proven to be a solid quarterback in the college level. But I do feel like Justin Fields is the best option for the Steelers at quarterback at the moment. They need to rebuild this offensive line from the ground up. They need to re-sign James Daniels to have some consistency at the O-line. Also need to sign O-linemen like Jedrick Wills and try to develop him at the, I believe, left guard or right tackle position, I believe. And finally, you guys need to continue to develop your young, now sophomore left guard or left tackle, Troy Fanatu, as well as in order to shore up the left tackle position as a whole, which is very important if you're going to be signing a quarterback for a long, an extensive contract, maybe 3-4 years. They also need to find some replacements for aging vets like T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward, possible through the draft with Mike Green from Marshall, or I'm going to butcher this name, Tylik Williams from Ohio State. Both are defensive lineman guys. Mike Green is edge, whereas I believe Williams is a tackle. But it would definitely help reload this defense as a whole, because T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward, for as good as they are, they only got so much tread left on the tires. Next up, let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, who need to have a big offseason this season. Right off the bat, they need to re-sign T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Trey Hendrickson to a long, extensive deal. Though they are having to pay for some of the highest wide receivers in the market right now, which is a little bit dangerous because they've kicked this can down the road, and rather than paying up when the number was lower, now they're going to have to belly up a little bit more cash at the table, possibly leaving T. Higgins and or Trey Hendrickson go in the market. They desperately need to rebuild this defense, especially the secondary as a whole. Having several safeties and corners walk into free agency isn't really a good look as a whole. So they need to take a step back, figure a way for them to begin to rebuild. They definitely should do it through the draft, free agency. There are a couple of free agent corners that would probably, corners. Yeah, you have a couple of younger guys. You could pick up a DJ Reed, try to a Byron Murphy as well, but it all depends on how much you're paying Jamar Chase and or T. Higgins and or Trey Hendrickson. The more that you lock down your cash, and we're starting to see this with the Chiefs, the more that you lock down your cash with like 4 or 5 year stars on the team, the less money you're going to have to rebuild around them. But yes, I do feel like they should make a swing for corner. and safety in free agency and the draft. The defense obviously needs an overhaul. It is the weak link on the Bengals team. And it's possibly holding Joe Burrow back from taking the team to the next step, which would be getting back to the Super Bowl and or possibly winning the Super Bowl. Now, who do I think? I've been seeing this go around. Who do I think will make the Super Bowl next year? I think it might be Bengals-Eagles. Just an early prediction, but we'll see. It all depends on how the Bengals tackle this off season and how hot of a start the Bengals get off to at the beginning of the season. All right, next up we have the Baltimore Ravens. Most of their positions have a very solid starters at them, and are not at very much of a worry for them at this moment. They need help at both the wide receiver position and in the secondary as a whole, adding pieces throughout the free agency and the draft as well. Obviously, corner wouldn't be a horrible spot to pick up. Maybe bring in like a Kendall Fuller or a Rasul Douglas. Older guys, but still guys who's got enough time left. Obviously, safety, you could bring in a Marcus Epps as like a rotational guy. Wouldn't be horrible. And obviously, for me, they need to focus big on wide receiver. Top targets at this position would be Chris Godwin if the contract talks go south with the Bucs, or T. Higgins possibly if they don't get outbid by teams like the Patriots and the Chargers, who have a lot higher cap space than the Ravens this offseason. If they want to get secondary help in the draft, if they want to draft young and try to build around Kyle Hamilton and who's their number 44? I forget off the top of my head, but if they want to build around Marlon Humphrey in his last few prime years of his career and Kyle Hamilton before he gets into his prime, they could definitely go safety with Malachi Starks from Georgia to go on the other side from Kyle Hamilton, or they could draft. Honestly, I could see them drafting edge at Texas A&M Shamar Stewart in the draft. You can either find players that can cover in the secondary better and don't allow your quarterback to have that clean of a window to get the ball to, or just don't allow the quarterback have time to make a pass. I mean, both of these guys can do that individually, so it definitely will be interesting to see how the Ravens go about trying to rebuild and renew this defense, which arguably was the weakest part of their team last season, especially that secondary. But we'll get into that once we get into preseason, how they tackled everything, how they rebuild. The Browns, boy, this one's a little bit of a doozy. The Browns are arguably the second worst position of all the teams in the NFL, only behind the Saints, in my opinion. And this is not just talking about this minute, it's also talking about the future as well. If they trade Myles Garrett and maybe Denzel Ward, they are able to get back some trade capital to focus on rebuilding for the future around a franchise guy at the quarterback position, or if they bring in a bridge guy at quarterback, bring back a Jameis Winston, bring in obviously they won't be able to get any top free agents like a Sam Darnold or Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, but if they bring in a bridge guy, or maybe even take a swing at a lesser, like a Kyle McCord in the draft, or a Will Howard in the draft in the third or fourth round, and just get a couple of the top defensive guys and offensive guys, especially in the trenches, through their first few picks of the draft. Let's see. They need to find a way out of Watson's contract in any way possible. Nothing more, nothing less at this point. They really can't hold on to this contract much longer. It's sinking them with cap space, obviously, and I know they just reworked it. I've heard rumors of a possible out in the contract where if Watson gets injured, they might be able to pull out of the deal and not have to pay him the rest of the money. So if I'm the Browns, I fully commit to that and try to find my franchise guy through the draft if possible. Taking some of their bigger contracts off the books with a Deshaun Watson, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward will shore up some possible space in the future for them to build this into a contending team. In the draft, you either take Cam Ward in the first round and get your cornerstone of the future on offense, or you get Abdul Carter and replace Myles Garrett and begin to build a defense that a young quarterback can lean on if needed, in whether that's a young quarterback this year or a young quarterback next year. If you start drafting younger studs, especially on the defensive side of the ball, to allow this team to lean on when the going gets tough, then I feel like the Browns might go that direction. Overall, looking at all these teams, the team that I believe will most likely win the AFC North as of right now is the Ravens, easily. The rest of the teams around them are either the bottom of the barrel, mediocre, or contenders that just can't get out of their own way. So the Ravens, in my opinion, are primed to have another season as AFC North champs, which, again, will prove hard. Steelers, no matter how they are, will continue to try to play this Ravens team tough. The Bengals didn't do too well against the Ravens, I'm pretty sure, last year. But I do feel like the entire team is in for a bounce-back year this year. And obviously the Browns are forever doomed in what I like to call NFL purgatory, where they, even if they draft well, they're going to continue to suck no matter what. Alright, so I know this episode was a little bit on the shorter side, but I just want to get something out for this week. This will probably become the format where I talk about something bigger, some bigger news, like the Chargers going down to Sao Paulo, analyzing that, analyzing possible Eagles matchups in the future, and covering a division as a whole and seeing what pieces they need to start rebuilding from this last off season, or this last season as a whole. Alright, so with all that being said, sorry for the shorter episode, but I figured that this is probably better. Might release this tonight and then start the Saturday thing next week. Just give me some time during the week. I completely forgot that I said I would do that last episode. So, with all that out of the way, hope you enjoyed today's episode, and remember, go Birds.